working. Let's go ahead.
Hello, can you hear us now? It looks like the microphone was bumped at some point and it was flashing, but now I think it isn't. Hello everyone, and welcome to Arcane Mark with Volume.
Indeed.
So today we're going to be talking about organized play, how to join and run games. It is a guide for home game players and GMs. So if you have no idea what a tabletop RPG is or how to play one, do not start with this video.
Yes.
Move to one of our other videos. We have like 100 videos about that. Then come back here. For this video, we're going to try to make it efficient for you, assuming you do know what that is. And so therefore, we're going to make a lot of assumptions that you know how to play a tabletop RPG, whether that's Pathfinder, D&D, or something else. Now, Linda, before the microphone was working, was about to start getting started with defining what actually is organized play. And given that Linda has run an organized play department, she probably knows. So take it away, Linda.
What is organized play? Organized play is a system that is set up for people to be able to play in different circumstances with a set of common ground rules. So if you are a home GM, you're probably going to have some conversations with your players before you get started with that first session. You might have the famous session 0 where you all get together and you talk about building your characters and what are going to be some of the shared assumptions. You might have house rules that you have for ways that you're going to run things, or you might have things about, ways that you rule on certain interactions between mechanics and things like that. In an organized play program, everyone is coming from a common baseline. And this means that GMs can freely switch up how their tables are working. You can have people who play the same character, say they play that character a little bit at a convention, and then they play it a bit at their local game store, and then they play that same character with some of their friends. They move to a different city, and then they can find a game store and play there. Organized play is really about having a common framework that allows you to be able to be flexible with your schedules and with who's available. So organized play programs often come with some pre-written adventures as well that are tailored to the way that organized play program flows, and that have certain assumptions or maybe a little bit different structural features to facilitate that. So for example, with Paizo organized play adventures, you're going to have adventures that support characters of different levels coming together at the same table, which is, pretty non-standard for a typical home game. But when you're gonna just get a pickup group that comes together, maybe you don't all have characters at the same level. So that kind of thing really helps out with that. They also can have their own reward structures in the same way that a GM can hand out treasure as a reward for completing sort of major story events or things like that. They can have other systems where, an adventure might drop some treasure that you can take or you can buy. They can't really make assumptions about what characters are going to be coming to the table. So they also need to have some flexibility in kind of how those rewards work, and provide rewards that will work for a broad variety of characters. So, you might have, for example, the Paizo organized play programs, Pathfinder Society and Starfinder Society, have players and GMs earning something called achievement points as they go through that they can use to unlock different character options and rewards on Paizo's website to customize their character.
That's right. So essentially, when you think about it, like Linda said, organized play offers you the ability to play at your home and then play in Japan, Australia, maybe the middle of the Arabian desert. Somebody played Pathfinder Society at one point, and you can keep that character throughout there. The way you do that, though, does involve, like Linda was saying, there's sort of this overarching organization, or even maybe a single person, depending on which organized play program you're going through, that is making decisions on behalf of all of the other GMs who are under the umbrella of that organized play program. Essentially, like the sort of the over GM is the organized play main group, and then each individual GM is playing using some of those rulings and decisions from that overarching group. So, for instance, in your home game, if you're the GM, you might decide how to incorporate rare and uncommon elements in your game, or something unique that's a specific reward that only this one archwizard once knew. Whereas in organized play, the organized play program will have to decide, are we just not going to use this unique spell that only this one archwizard knew? Are we going to make an adventure where you can meet the archwizard and learn the spell from them as a reward for that adventure? Maybe, in the case of Pathfinder Starfinder Society, it will cost a certain number of achievement points to be like, yeah, I went to a special lecture by this archwizard who taught me the spell because I paid X number of achievement points to have gone to that lecture. Or maybe there's an option to get it from the adventure and that gives you a discount in the achievement points or something like that. There's numerous ways that the program can make these decisions, but the important thing is that as the GM, you, the individual GM, can't just like write on somebody's sheet, I decided to throw that archwizard into the adventure and they taught the spell to this person. It's a sort of a shared assumption, which means the experience is going to be parallel from people all over the world. And you know, if you played Archwizard's Lecture Adventure 12-09, that you would know that you met that Archwizard and you got a chance to learn that spell.
Yeah. So organized play adventures are also generally designed so that they're not required to be run in a specific order. You might have short little series that are like a few adventures that are all clumped together, but generally things can be run in any order, and if this creates a little bit of timey-wimey stuff, then, you know, you just kind of roll with it. In the same way that you can have a situation, for example, pretty easily where everyone at the table has played a particular adventure before, but they've played it at different tables. So the tables have kind of a different canon for what went down.
So there are some organized play programs that run things differently. There have been many over the years, Living Greyhawk, Living City, Living Forgotten Realms, lots of things that start with the word living. In some of organized play programs, it can be the case where you can't play a adventure that's a part of a multi-part series or that's part of a certain amount of time outside of a particular time window, or without playing the adventures that come before it as prerequisites or something like that to unlock. In most modern organized play programs, they work exactly as Linda has described, because there needs to be some kind of a balance between sort of the coherence of the timeline and of things making sense with accessibility and the ability to actually run and play these games. Now, one of them that went all the way on the other side of the pendulum on that was Living Forgotten Realms during 4th edition D&D, where you could just repeat the same adventure over and over again to farm the rewards and immediately create characters at whatever level you needed to play. And so that went all the way to accessibility. Most modern organized play campaigns have some kind of balance with that, where you want some kind of feeling of progression or coherence, but you want to go a lot in the way of making it easier for people to actually put a game together and fewer barriers of entry.
Because there's always going to be different factors that you need to balance in a campaign when you're trying to make it accessible and enjoyable for the largest number of people. Like, for example, what Mark's talking about there with repeatability, if you make it so that adventures can be replayed any number of times, then you can run into situations where when new players come and sit at the table, they're sitting at the table with people who have all played the adventure 6 times before and know where everything's going. And that can create awkwardness too. So there's always a push and pull between the different use cases of an organized play program that needs to be considered when setting policy.
Okay, so that's what an organized play campaign is and a little bit about how it's different. So how can you do this? How can you join? How can you run games? You already know how to play. You already know how to GM in your home game. What's different and what do you need to look for? So first of all, any good organized play campaign is going to have information to help you get started online. So look up the name of the organized play campaign that you think that you want to join, and you should be able to find a landing page with information that can usually get you signed up right online without even having to find a person to like talk to do anything.
So, for example, if you're interested in Pathfinder Society or Starfinder Society, you could go to pathfindersociety.club or starfindersociety.club, respectively.
Yep, and the Adventures League has a page for that, and so do pretty much most other organized play campaigns that are out there. Now, that's going to be enough to, like, say, get a number or an account for organized play, but that's obviously not going to immediately throw you into a game. So the next thing that you need to do after that is find a community. Now, this doesn't have to be your local community in Meat Space, where you can find physical human beings who you can play the games with, usually at game stores or local conventions. It could be one of the many vibrant online communities. Just try to find one that plays at a time zone that works for you, which might not be your own if you are a night owl and you want to play at a time zone where more people are awake than the people who actually live near you.
So it's likely that the homepage for whatever campaign you're looking for will have some information on that. For Pathfinder and Starfinder Society, it is on that page, but just to sort of reference it, and this is also can be true for some other games too, that Warhorn is a really great platform to go to for looking at. Warhorn.net has a bunch of information about games, both ones that are online and ones that are in Meat Space in specific places. For Pathfinder and Starfinder Society also, there are organizers, regional organizers, regional venture captains who will, whose job it is to, or volunteer job rather, whose role is to know about the communities that are playing in their area and to help people connect. So there's ones there for online. There's also ones for people who want to play in Russian or people who want to play in French. As well as ones that are specific to different regions. So you can, so there's an email address there that you can reach out to for a person in your particular sphere of interest and be like, hey, I live in this city. What can you tell me about games that are near me?
Now, normally that is how you would go about it, but you don't technically have to. If you are a home GM and you've got a group of people and everybody wants to play organized play, if you just have everyone join organized play, you could theoretically run your first organized play games just with your home group that you're familiar with to help build practice. You could even run pretty much solely with your home group in organized play. It obviously won't get the other benefits of organized play, being able to play around the world with large groups of different people. But maybe you just love the adventures that are offered by that organized play and you want to play with your home group. In that case, you can. If everyone is signed up, you can read the rules for your particular style of organized play and then just play with the same people you normally do. So you don't have to go find it, but it can be to your advantage to go find organized play because that can allow you to be a player if you're a forever GM.
Absolutely.
Or it can allow you to GM for different players that you haven't GM'd for that can help teach you GM skills you might not have learned with your home group. So let's say you now have a group, whether it's your original group, whether it's new people, what have you. Now you want to get started with the actual game. So if you're a player, make sure that you have a character that is registered for this organized play campaign.
This could also, alternatively, if you're just kind of looking to dip your toes into it, or you don't have very much time, or you just want to try out a new class or what have you, there's a lot of for the Paizo organized play programs, there are pre-generated characters that are available for free online that you can pick up and use.
Most organized play campaigns do have pre-generated characters, at least the modern ones. Some of the older ones, they didn't, because it was very much about customize your own character, play your own thing. But in general, you can find organized play campaigns that have pre-generated characters that you could just pick up and go. Now, if you're an experienced player or GM, which we're assuming for this video, you might not want to do that because maybe you're like, no, I'm not the target audience for this. But if you just suddenly saw it at a convention, in which case I'm surprised you had time to watch this video, but if you did, having those pre-generated characters can be helpful. And if you're GMing and you don't know who's coming to your table, it is very smart to bring along the pre-generated characters because that will make life much easier because you may be the experienced GM, but your players might be first-time players who did not watch this video and are not sure what's going on.
Yeah.
So those pre-generated characters are very, very useful and important to you. Now, let's say you're not the player, though. You're the GM. What are you going to need to do? So organized play campaigns have typically short adventures that can be run in a single session. Sometimes they have adventures of varying length. Some different campaigns had like particular nights where it was just like a single encounter, and other nights where you would do a longer form scenario. Pathfinder and Starfinder Society are like this, where you can find a variety of things, sometimes with different names depending on what era of the campaign you're looking at, such as bounties or one-shots versus
quests
scenarios
and things
or
like
quests.
that. Yes.
But the fact of the matter is you want to look at what the run length is so that you make sure you have enough time.
Every adventure has its run length listed in the front.
Especially if your venue is a convention or a game store that might run out of time in the convention slot or close if it's a game store. This is something that can definitely affect some GMs who are known to run over their slots.
Yeah. If you don't already know all of your players, then and they're like people that you're familiar with playing with, one thing that's important to consider is that you can have a variety of experience levels and materials coming to your table. So you might have someone who's coming to your table who's brand new to the game system and, for example, doesn't own dice. So it's good to bring not just the pre-generated characters, but also like some extra supplies, having enough minis that folks can like pick something out and stick it out there for their character if they don't have a mini, or, you know, having extra dice sets or having things like that. So you have enough to run for the table.
Notice how Linda smoothly transitioned over to the dice sets and away from the people who run over their time slot and might get kicked out of the game store. That's because Linda was well known for running over her time slot.
I was never kicked out of a game store.
That's true. The only one we know of who was John Compton. So you're in good company if you run over slots, because some of the best GMs who were like the most deeply into organized play that I know are also ones who ran over their slots, possibly because they enriched the scenarios with lots of extra cool stuff.
Yeah. And one thing that is that it's also useful is any tools that you like to use for your home game to keep things moving along, whether that's like an initiative tracker board, or, you know, whether you have whether you can kind of assemble your map in advance or things like that. It's good to keep things running smoothly. And when you're going to get started with those folks at the table, if you don't know each other, you know, it is true that us gamers can be a bit socially awkward. So starting off with a round of introductions is a really great way to break that ice. I like to have a little piece of paper with me where I draw a picture of the table, and then going around the circle, I'll write down people's real names and their character names, and then that way I know how to address them. So if there are tools or techniques that you use to help remember people's names in new circumstances and things like that, those are good to have on hand too.
Going back to the player's perspective, if you are at this one shot and you've never met these people before, you may never see them again. It's really important, if you want to get the role play to sort of like stick and to be meaningful, that you need to play a character differently than you would in a home campaign. And these introductions are the first place where you can start doing that. In a home campaign, maybe you're going to play 50 sessions with this character, and you have this complex and nuanced emotional arc where the character begins as a bit naive, but also maybe a bit nihilistic because of their tragic past. And they learn to understand the world better, orphan. But also to open up to others across the course of 50 sessions with these complex arcs with each of the other characters. And you don't have that. No. You may never see these people again. Your character is, as a player, needs to be a little bit more of having like a big shtick that is very visible if you want the role playing to be understandable to the people who will only see you there and will not see you again. This nuanced art that you're doing in your head, you can do that at organized play, and you could keep track of the fact that it's happened, but other people are not going to see it, and they won't necessarily understand. At best, they'll see your character as being whatever that character was at that one point in time along their arc.
One of the most memorable characters from organized play that I've seen is a player who played a paladin who would always take notes on the adventure, and then he took notes in real life, and then had this entire journal that was a record of all of those adventures, and that was like, wow, that's really cool. That's super memorable.
That's a very memorable shtick that makes the character stand out, and so if you don't have something like that, it's going to be trickier as a player. So that ties into the introductions, because that is when you can. You could even say what the shtick is when you're introducing your character to the other players. Now, let's move back to the GM. We got to the table introductions, but in fact, before we reached the table introductions, moving back a little bit to there are lots of different kinds of adventures with different lengths. Figure out what your length is. Figure out an adventure that maybe has a cool topic that you find interesting. You then will need to purchase the adventure. Some organized play campaigns will give you the adventure for free in certain situations, such as potentially conventions or...
Game stores might do that, or just the setup.
Yes.
Varies,
so you either purchase it or receive it. It depends on your situation. You will now want to read the adventure. You might not be able to if you get thrown into something at a convention, but as a new to organized play GM, very few organized play campaigns will actually throw someone like that into the middle of a situation where you can't go in prepared. So read the adventure, prepare it, take into account all of the major story beats in there. What are the encounters? What are the role-playing moments? Where are the places where it might flag, or the places where it might get exciting? Where are the places where it might get confusing, or it might go off the assumed rails of the adventure? With an organized play one-shot adventure, you don't have the leeway to go completely off the rails, because if you do, not only might it take so long that you run out of your normal slot, but it also might not deliver like the experience with that adventure that like leads into the rest of the storyline of organized play.
That being said, players don't have to approach challenges in the way that the adventure assumes that they will.
Absolutely.
There can be something that's set up to be likely to be a combat that the players overcome with other skills, or there can be something that's set up to, they sneak their way through or what have you.
But even more extreme, anyone who's watched this channel enough has at least once heard about the story where Linda ran an adventure where we teleported to the end of the dungeon where the NPCs we were supposed to rescue beat the boss, and then had to take them backwards through the dungeon as an escort mission through all the other encounters. That was an organized play campaign. You can have very unusual or completely off the wall or unexpected ways of solving the adventure. But they have to actually do the adventure, right? Yeah. We didn't say in that one, oh, these archaeologists are trapped down there. Well, that doesn't sound like where we want to go. We're going to go surfing on the beach in a different continent, and then we teleport there. You can't do that in an organized play adventure. There's some buy-in that the players have to have where they are going to actually do the adventure.
They're going to go to the location of the adventure. They're going to be trying to achieve the goal.
And they are going to be trying to do that, but you can make sure the players are bought in with that, because you could even say, if they come up with some weird idea where they would be going to a completely different place, but that maybe theoretically would solve it. Like, let's say you're supposed to go to a particular embassy and negotiate there, and the players are like, well, you know what? I actually met the ruler of that country, and I'd like to just teleport to the castle and talk to the actual ruler instead of the embassy. And let's say in this situation that would actually work, and they have a thing on their sheets like best buddies with the ruler of that country. You could be like, okay, that's a very clever idea. That would have been cool if the adventure had something to account for the fact that you could have gotten to be best buddies with that ruler. It does not, so I'm just going to give you kudos on that, but let's assume that the ruler is busy and that you can't meet with her today, and you're
Yeah.
gonna have to go to the embassy because that's where the adventure is. So you can just be upfront with the players and let them know, you know, there's an organized play adventure. It's got the stuff in a particular place, and just tell them, congratulate them, tell them it's a good idea, but that then have them buy into the explanation, or even be like, I can't even think of why the ruler wouldn't meet with you because it says you have a walkie-talkie and that they meet with you anytime. You tell me what it is, and they'd be like, well, maybe there's astral interference with the walkie-talkie right now due to the astral plane being a little bit having a bunch of NO sites that are like going on a parade or something. Like, maybe the player will help you come up with an idea for why it wouldn't work. So you can be very upfront and be like, this is great, we can't do it, we need to move.
And it's always going to be a judgment call, right? Because if what you were bypassing with that was like a single small skill challenge, then it's like, okay, yeah, you know, that feels more fair.
Whereas if the entire adventure is at the embassy, and talking to the ruler, they just be like, yeah, dog, go for it, you're done, and then be like, oh, we don't have to do the adventure. Then it would be a different story than if it's just like, oh, you talk to the ambassador for like a brief little role play vignette, and then you go to the actual site that the ambassador gives you the approval. Maybe it's okay to just have the queen be like, yeah, dog, go to the adventure site. You're good. Yeah,
because the general guideline there is that you can reskin sort of the some of the like story of things as long as the mechanics are intact. So another one of the examples that's given in the organized play guide is like, let's say that there is a treasure that the players can find in a particular area, if they opened up a secret door that was in a place that they didn't go to because they bypassed that region. It advises that you move that secret door to another part of the complex where they actually are, so that they are able to interact with all of the challenges that the adventure has and all the opportunities.
Basically, so they don't get punished for coming up with the a good solution to something. So in this example, if the queen just says on a walkie-talkie that we can go there and we don't have to go to the embassy, which had a secret door in it, for some reason we're robbing. I don't know why.
I don't know what we're doing.
Or maybe we found a secret door that was built into the embassy from the people who owned it before the embassy, and they're like, "Whoa, you found this here. This is good to know because we could get killed by someone coming in this way. You can keep the treasure that's in there as a reward for finding this." And let's say instead you just add it to the adventure site because you didn't go to the embassy because you talked to the queen directly on your walkie-talkie.
Yeah. There's also when I'm talking about reskinning to make it a better experience for the players, for example, there's the sort of archetypical example of web shooting lizards.
Instead of spiders, somebody has arachnophobia.
So if you have something there's something in the adventure that's a no-go for some of the players at the table, you can absolutely change the way that thing is described. So
but you can't change the stats to just another creature you chose of the same level, or, you know what, Shellen forbid, a different level.
Yeah.
That has happened in the past with sometimes in organized play, and it has led to many organized play campaigns having very, very hardline rules that clearly indicate that you can't do that, because it's all well and good when the GM correctly determines that they can add a little bit more spice to an encounter to make it more interesting, but not when it wipes out the entire party and they later discover that the adventure as written wouldn't have done that. It was just because the GM threw extra enemies or a different enemy.
Yeah, and even if we say, like, let's say that 4 out of 5 GMs out there would always adjust things right, that 1 out of 5 that doesn't is going to, because you often have players trading around among GMs, a lot of players might have their experience soured by playing with the GM who's like, oh, this isn't hard enough, let me throw in some extra stuff.
Absolutely. So in your place as the GM, it's just important to read the adventure, know what's in there, know roughly how it's structured. In case the players do take a baseball bat to some of the plot line and do something weird, then you're able to follow it along. One way you might consider, especially if it's a twisty-turny adventure where there's options to like skip around or have multiple possible ways of dealing with things that have implications down the line, is to draw a little flowchart of the adventure to see which ways and paths the adventure could potentially take. And as the GM, then when you're running it, you can look at the flowchart and see where you're at currently at the moment. It can give you a very easy visual of what the adventure's idea space is and where it seems like the players are progressing. If you can do that and you can pay attention to the situation that's going on, then that will allow you to sort of get more into the organized play experience without feeling like, oh my gosh, let me make sure if we're on track.
Yeah, and another thing that's true in organized play and also just any other pre-written adventure is if there's a thing that you're just like, I always have to look this up, taking notes on your adventure can be super useful. Like, for example, in, if you're like, oh, I don't know what level this item is, so I don't know what, this thing is, so I don't know what the counteract DC would be, or something like that. Writing little notes in the corner there can be super useful to you to help things flow. There's a lot of folks online will make sort of handouts and tools also and share them on places like Paizo's website, paizo.com, or things like that. So you can sometimes find resources that other GMs have built to assist.
Absolutely. So by using assisting resources, those can be really, really good because people who have run that adventure multiple times often know where the pain points are or where the trouble points are. You can even be in a situation where you're ahead of where you possibly could have been in a home game that you created yourself, just due to the fact that you've got all the support from other people who would never have known what you were doing in the home game that you created yourself. And especially if those are tools that are able to help with some of the things that you find harder because the person who created the tools found the same elements to be more difficult, you can feel almost like you have a whole community at your back sort of supporting you and helping you through. Another thing that can be useful, potentially, is if you're able to join a game as a player first and play the same adventure that you're planning on running. You can see where that GM went right and where that GM went off, if possible, or where it was tougher. They might have done something that's not literally written in the adventure, but that was so good when you played through it that you're like, I have to do that when I'm running it too. Or they might have done something that made the adventure stall that you're like, okay, the adventure said to do this, but I saw why that didn't work when I was playing it, so I'm going to switch it around a bit in how I present that to the players.
If things that, if you were like, oh, well, our table got a little bit stalled, are there, might this be a place where some kind of handout or reference would help people, or like, some players, if there's a situation where this is just like being a home GM, right? If there's a situation where players are talking to a lot of different NPCs, then having some kind of like a handout about them or like an art piece for each character or whatever like that, then it's like, okay, yeah, now I can keep track of like who's Count whatever and who's Duchess whatever and that kind of thing.
Count whatever and Duchess whatever, surprisingly, are married in the Duchy of whatever, but the Count only has the title of Count, which is a hereditary title, and the Duchess, his wife, is a Duchess, and he decided to keep the title of Count, kind of like how sometimes like a prince or princess in England can also be like the Duke of somewhere else. Obviously, that's who Duke, Duchess, and Count whatever are. So
the question is, generally a good idea to play a scenario before you GM it? Sounds like I would say when you're getting started out, especially, it's a good idea to get that experience.
When you're experienced, it's not really a big deal.
But if you can't, like, it's not really a big deal. I would also recommend when you're getting started with GMing organized play, look for intro type scenarios because those will both help your players get a sense of what's going on, and also they tend to be written in a way that expects beginners to be engaging with it more on both sides of the GM screen.
Right. I also suggest that you play a type of weird scenario before you GM that type of weird scenario, even if it's not literally the same scenario. So, for example, you might want to play an interactive special at least once before you GM your first interactive special, because that is its own can of worms. Or if you have an adventure that is almost entirely role-playing with influence and very few combat encounters, you might want to play through one of them first, see what worked and what didn't.
Yes.
Before you GM your first time.
But it also has to do with how much experience you have as a GM overall.
That's right.
Too.
if you are really good at influence encounters in your home game, you're probably going to be fine just running the one that's in the scenario. Whereas there's really nothing you can do in your home game that will completely prepare you for an interactive special and what that is. And so playing that in organized play first, even if it's not the same one that you're going to be running, is generally a pretty good idea. And the same can be true with higher level scenarios, but honestly, if you've just run the game at high levels in your home game, that's going to teach you at least 90%, if not more, of anything you would need to pick up for higher level scenarios. So I wouldn't actually say that a higher level scenario is one of the types of weird adventure that you would want to have played through before.
I would see it as more like there's a difference between the ones that are specifically intro focused and then the other ones. And like I would say maybe the really high level ones can be different, because once you start getting to like level 9 plus, the assumptions on what the characters have available to them are generally broader, and they're more likely to do something that goes beyond the scope of the adventure. But I don't think it's necessarily like anything that's higher than level 1 is. But to what Kojo's saying, if it's a good idea to have played at those levels first. I mean, it would be good to have played at those levels at some point if you can.
Or GM get them in a home game or something. But you know what? You're always going to have your first experience with a certain level range somewhere, whether it's playing in a home game, playing in organized play, running in a home game, or running in organized play. And I don't think it's dire if your first time is running in organized play with that level range.
No, I don't think so either.
Obviously, you can just let people know and be like, look, I've at this point now we've been playing together sometimes, or maybe you haven't played with them, but you'd be like, I've run a bunch of games in organized play now, but I've never run or played anything at level 12 or higher, even in my home games, and this is my first time. So if there's anything weird that you guys can do recently with a level 12, help me out and let me know in advance, and bear with me if there's some weird level 12 shenanigans that I'm not prepared for.
Yeah. I would say that in that case, it would be good to, you don't have to familiarize yourself with everything, but taking a look at some of those higher level spell lists and higher level feats to have a broad sense in the core rulebook or the player core of the types of things that the players might be bringing to bear.
Right. Or the player's handbook for D&D.
So another thing that can be useful for that, because you're not familiar with what characters can do, and I like to do is ask, are there any abilities that I specifically need to know about that your character has, such as a trap finding ability or another ability that would require me to roll secret checks for you whenever a certain thing comes up? So that way, if there's something that, because with the home game, you're going to know, oh, this person has an ability where every time there's a trap nearby, I need to roll a secret check. But you won't necessarily know that with that group, and people may not think to tell you that. Or like where, an ability where like when you get a tie on initiative, you actually win, even though you're a character instead of an NPC. Just whatever those kinds of abilities are that people will be like, oh, wait, actually I had this. Wait, now let's retcon that I would have been able to find that trap, and things like that is just much easier.
That's right. So basically, organized play is just like the games that you play at home with, maybe a few more rules or restrictions put in to give you sort of a consistent experience. And that means that your experience as a home player or GM is going to work just fine in organized play. You just have to look for what are those things that are a little bit different. What is extra in there? So, for instance, in Pathfinder Society organized play, there's free consumables they give you because everybody is part of an organization who is being sent out on missions, and they're not going to just send you out there and force you to get all your supplies out of your own money. They're going to try to give you some things to help you out. So that's a little bit different, but it's honestly not that different than the Gardens of Power rules from Treasure Vault, for example. There's these achievement points Linda talked about before that can be used to unlock things that are rare that you might in a home game just ask the GM and be like, hey, can you put in an adventure where we go to an ancient temple and find this rare item because I really want this rare item, whereas you can't do that in organized play. So instead you might theoretically there might be an adventure already written that does that, but usually there isn't, and so you can use achievement points for that. And there's just a few other small things like that you can pick up. For instance, in Pathfinder Society Organized Play, the experience points are smaller numbers that are needed to level up. Although really, I think they're just like a tenth of the slow track.
Yeah, they are.
Of XP. So really, if you just multiply the numbers by 10, it would just be using the slow track for experience points under the normal system.
Or 100th of it.
Or 100th?
Yeah.
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 Because it's out of...
It's out of 12 instead of 1,200.
1,200, yeah. Sorry, it's 1%.
Yep.
So it's missing 2 zeros. It used to be back in the day in Pathfinder First Edition that it was way more different than the XP system, but it has gotten to the point where it's closer now. And so when you just see that there's these small differences, but that it's mostly the same, you can understand that almost all, other than the few things we talked about today in this video, of your experience is going to be fully transmissible to...
Yeah, absolutely. And often when you find, if you're joining an existing community, you know, say a community at your local game store or what have you, or the online community, you can find... other people who have experience GMing for organized play who would be happy to help you out. I find that, you know, a lot of folks when we were organizers in Boston appreciated having someone at the table who's kind of like the experienced person who's there to be the, like, you can ask me questions anytime, and then that can help take the pressure off. So so it's good to look for those kind of folks who you can be like, hey, what's the deal with this thing? And they can be like, oh, yeah. Or they can, if you're not sure, they can look something up for you or things like that. And Kojo had a question about when I talk about intro scenarios, am I talking about more like the intro to a season scenarios like 601 or things like 2-11, the Pathfinder Trials? That's a great question. Either works, honestly. Anything that we put the word intro in or mark it in kind of an intro-y way is structured in that more new player-friendly way. Pathfinder Trials type stuff is even a little more so, but both of them had that consideration in hand, that people who are playing this, both in terms of how they're structured and like the extra reminders they have in them, and also in terms of the approach to, generally speaking, the approach to canon and trying to focus more on things that are broader knowledge. I'd also recommend some of the shorter form adventures like that. The quests, both the new series and old series type quests, are designed to have fewer canon ties and therefore be more approachable to people who may be new to the campaign setting.
Absolutely. So the main takeaway here that you should have is that if there's anything that you run into when you're going to run or play organized play, and you're thinking, hey, this wasn't exactly in this video, or this organized play campaign was a little different than the one that Linda and Mark were talking about, the strength of organized play is the community. So leverage that community. You will be able to find an organizer or another player somewhere who not only is happy to help you, but is even eager to help you out and to get you into and joining the organized play campaign that you want to join.
You're also welcome to drop questions and comments down below this video.
Yep. And we will help you out too. We're part of a community as well. Or you can go to tiny.cc/arcademark and join our Discord, which does not literally have organized play games that are being run there. Some Discords do, but is a place where you can go to discuss things with us and with a lot of other people, or put in an LFG. So with that, everyone, I would say please remember to like and subscribe to the video if you enjoy this content. You could even join if you want to support us. We always like to know what people are interested in. Speaking of which, how about we vote for the video that will be in 2 weeks? Because next week we're actually going to do Arcade Mark Plays. But actually, you know what? Maybe we didn't need to have a vote.
Oh, well, that's fine. We can have a vote anyway, and we'll
have a vote, and we'll do it eventually.
Yes.
So, yeah, we actually technically shouldn't have done a vote.
Meh.
That's fine.
We'll try to remember next time that we don't need to do a vote. And someday we'll eventually remember that we don't need to do a vote.
Well, it may not be fair to the Arcade Mark Plays if we don't do a vote on the Arcade Marketplace to see if we want to extend
Oh,
it.
yeah, that's true. Okay.
All right.
So we can do this one whenever the Arcade Marketplace chain ends.
Yes. There we go. So we will see. We have 3 votes for GM Tools holiday specials and themed one-shots, and 1 vote for Arcade Marketplace, which we're already doing next week. 4 votes.
4 votes. So
it
I think
looks
it's
like
going to be holiday specials and themed one-shots.
Tyranny has won again.
Tyranny.
All right, everybody. We will see you on Tuesday for whatever the episode is, which I am forgetting at the current moment.
We'll figure it out.
It was whatever the thing we took off from there was. It was something
It
about
was
like
crud. It was a tyranny. What was a tyranny? What was a
it was
tyrannical?
not exactly about pacing either, but it was something similar to that.
We'll find
We'll
it.
figure it out, and we'll see you on Tuesday for that, or next Saturday when we're going to be playing a game. So join us or any other time.